Some of these big heavy pieces of the plane had punched through the E-ring, punched through the D-ring, made it through the C-ring, and their last little bit of momentum managed to punch a hole in the innermost wall of the C-ring. So there were some places you could crawl into to try and help or see if there was anybody that could be helped. So I crawled into one, and it was there was a big metal door, and I could hear people pounding on the other side and screaming. So I picked up the first thing I could find, this big metal stanchion, and started trying to bust into the door. And I could hear them, their screams or their yelling got louder because they could hear me banging. And then it got quiet. So because I wasn't making any progress. So my assumption was that they figured another way to get out, I hope. So that was fruitless. Crawled in a little bit further, but by this point, the conduit, the plastic that sheathes the wires in the ceiling and some of the other plastic things were starting to melt. So I took my shirt off and wrapped it around my head. So these drops of melting plastic and metal are starting to hit skin and hit back and things. I was wearing a uniform similar to this, a khaki uniform, but they've changed the material just a little bit, so it's not quite as synthetic. It's a little more fire resistant. But the shoes I was wearing were Coreframe. It's a wonderfully high gloss shine, but not meant for firefighting or being in a hot environment. So they started to get a little uncomfortable. So I again splashed some water on them, splashed some water on my head, and then just kind of crawled in a little further into the Pentagon, trying to find my friend, trying to find anybody who could. So I'm yelling and anybody in here? Bob, you here? Flames are starting to get a little thick. The smoke gets thicker, and the hot gases become intolerable. So I wasn't making any progress in there. Crawled out, found another hole, and it was actually hotter than the one I had been in, so I was a little reluctant to stay there too long. But then I figured I was exactly where I could see exactly where my friend's desk should have been. So flames are shooting up. It's clear that if he's there, he's either about had it or close to. So I'm trying to get as close as I can, and I'm screaming for him and screaming for anybody. And somebody heard me and came, saw me and came running out past me. That was great. It was an Army officer, covered with just dust and blood. So as I'm focusing 20 yards into this office space, it's on fire and falling apart. I noticed when there's this head, this sort of, it was surreal. It was like this very odd head-shaped entity staring at me, eyes just open and staring. And it blinked, and suddenly I realized what I was looking at was someone who was trapped, who couldn't move, and probably couldn't speak at the time, in shock. And so this person's trapped, and it's a wall has fallen on him. So I'm trying to push this wall up and get enough room for him to squeeze out. And his desk has collapsed on him and his chair. I'm trying to lift this up and move this, and it wasn't budging. And as I'm screaming for someone to come help me, and I'm just screaming at the top of my lungs, because this guy's going to go soon. There's flames at his backside, and you can't breathe. It's too hot. So as I'm screaming, and I hear this noise behind me, and there's this other naval officer crawling in on his hands and knees, or crawling in on his belly like a combat crawl. And he yells, "Hey, what do you got? What's going on?" And I point and I say, "There's a guy trapped over there, and I can't get this up." And this turns out a guy I'd never met before, Dave Tarantino. He gets on his back with this stuff dripping on, this hot molten plastic and metal dripping down on him and me. And he's face up, lying on his back, and he basically leg presses this desk high enough for this man to get freed up, just enough to slide down and escape. So his foot gets caught. He's almost clear, and his foot gets caught, and we leave his shoe behind, and he slides out, and we take him outside. And it was a guy I'd never met before, a guy named Jerry Henson, a former naval aviator, retired on the Navy staff. I worked in the same complex as my friend. So he got outside, and we got him some medical attention. And in the minute or two, as we tried to catch our breath, me and Dave Tarantino, you look up in the sky, and it's the same beautiful, beautiful September morning that it was when I got out of my car to start my day. Except it was dark when I got out of my car. And there's this clear blue sky, and did that just happen? And I know I'm going back in to find my friend. And I know haven't seen what he was up to. I knew he was not done. And I was so fearful that I would never know him. And the story of what just happened would never be known to Jerry Henson. It just was spontaneity. I reached over and I grabbed his name tag and pulled it off and just kind of stuck it in my pocket. Introduced myself and said, it's great to meet you. I'll see you later. And went back in to try to find my friend. But at that point, there was some compressed gas cylinders or something that started to explode, and some pieces of the ceiling were starting to come down. And so there was no more of that, no more going in to pull people out of that part of the building. So then began an endless day of trying to find people, occasionally finding people who were lost, who had wandered into smoke-filled areas where they just couldn't figure out how to get out, and in guiding them out or giving them direction, and then looking for other folks. It was, again, it's a huge office building, and I had never seen it empty before. But at that point, and it's probably an hour after the thing had begun, it was completely empty. There was anyone who was going to get out had left, was out, or had been rescued. So there's this sort of foggy, smoky cloud and an empty offices everywhere, as if the people had just been, instantly removed. So there's clearly a phone had just been left down, or a memo had just been halfway written, or a Danish in a cup of coffee, not consumed, but halfway gone.